The day I found out my mom had told everyone I was dead, I thought it had to be some kind of sick joke. I remember that moment with an eerie clarity. I was eating leftover pizza at my kitchen counter when a message from an old classmate lit up my phone screen. "I'm so sorry for your loss," it read. My loss. Confused, I scrolled further and felt the blood drain from my face. There were dozens of missed texts and voicemails, all offering condolences, like I was gone. A cold prickle of fear crawled up the back of my neck. None of it made any sense. I was right there, very much alive. So why did people think I was dead? My hands were shaking as I tapped my way to the source of the rumor. It didn't take long to find it. A social media post from my own mother stopped me cold. She had posted a picture of me, one of my graduation photos, complete with my forced smile and cap and gown, along with a caption that read like an obituary. "Rest in peace, my beautiful child," she wrote, followed by a paragraph about how I had gone to a better place. Each word hit me like a punch to the gut. She was acting as if I'd died in some tragic accident. I stared at my own smiling face in that photo, now framed by digital candles and crying emojis. It felt like I was staring at my own memorial, watching my life being erased in real time. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I thought I might actually pass out right there on the kitchen floor. My heart hammered against my ribcage as I refreshed the page, hoping I was hallucinating or that the post would vanish, some glitch in the algorithm. But it stayed, stubbornly real and horrifying. People were commenting things like, "Stay strong, we're praying for you," and "She was such a wonderful girl, gone too soon." With trembling fingers, I clicked on my mom's profile. Every post for the past week was about me, her dead daughter. She was sharing memories of me as if I'd been dead for years, telling everyone how brave I'd been, how tragic it was to lose me. My mother was publicly mourning me, and I was alive to see it. I couldn't breathe. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room, replaced by this overwhelming sense of betrayal and confusion. My throat tightened, and I realized I was making a strange gasping sound, halfway between a sob and a laugh. I kept shaking my head, muttering no, 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 under my breath, as if I could negate the reality in front of me. This had to be some twisted prank or a hacker's doing, right? My mom couldn't possibly be behind something so insane. But the post was from her verified account, full of family pictures only she had. And it wasn't just one post. She had filled her profile with old photos of me and long, sentimental captions about how tragic it was to lose me. Reading the captions, I could almost hear her voice speaking those words, calm and somber, like she had written my eulogy. I felt a nausea roil in my stomach as realization started to settle in. This wasn't a mistake or a hack. My mother was telling the world that I was dead, and she was doing it with a straight face, collecting sympathy like it was her due. The room spun a little, and I had to grip the edge of the counter to steady myself. My vision blurred with tears I hadn't even realized were filling my eyes. One thought kept screaming in my head over and over. Why would my own mom do this to me? I sank onto the cold kitchen tile, back against the cabinet, trying to steady my breathing. My mind was racing in 1,000 directions, but one question cut through the chaos. How did we get here? How did my life turn into this? To understand that, I think you need to know a little about my mom and the kind of relationship we've always had. Growing up, I learned early that my mother had a tenuous relationship with the truth. She wasn't a pathological liar in the usual sense. She didn't lie about where she went or what she bought. It was more subtle, more insidious. She lied about life, about people, about memories. She would simply rewrite reality if it didn't fit the story she liked to tell. As a kid, I thought all parents did that. Every mom embellishes a little when bragging about their child. Every mom occasionally says things that aren't exactly true. But my mom, she took it to another level. As I got older, the lies and rewrites only got stranger. When my dad left us, I was 5 years old. Mom told me he died in a car wreck. I believed her for years, went so far as to burn handmade Father's Day cards at a makeshift grave in our backyard. As a teenager, I found out by accident that my father wasn't dead at all, just living a new life somewhere else. When I confronted Mom, she denied ever saying he died, insisting I misremembered her words. I didn't even bother to argue. She was set on her version of reality. In my heart, I knew she was lying, but I also knew she'd never admit it. She never admitted any of her lies. She lived in them. Living under her roof meant accepting her reality or facing unpredictable consequences. One day she'd be sweet, showering me with praise and affection, especially if I played along as the perfect daughter in her narratives. The next day, she might be ice cold, barely speaking to me except to criticize. It kept me on edge, always guessing which version of Mom I'd get. One day in high school, when a guidance counselor called to congratulate me on a college scholarship opportunity, She simply shook her head and told me that conversation never happened. I wasn't going anywhere, she said, and I foolishly obeyed, letting another piece of my future slip away. By the time I finally got the courage to move out at 18, I did it almost in secret. I applied to an out-of-state college without telling her until the last possible moment. When I did, she was furious, first yelling, then crying, then falling into one of her eerie silences. The day I left for school, she stood on the porch, arms crossed, jaw tight, and said only, "You're going to regret this." I remember her silhouette shrinking in the rearview mirror as I drove away, unsure if I was making the best decision of my life or the biggest mistake. Part of me ached leaving her behind, knowing how fragile she could be when things didn't go her way. But a bigger part of me felt relieved. Finally, freedom. I naively thought distance would break her control over me. For a while, it seemed to. In college, I barely heard from Mom except for the occasional guilt-trippy text or a holiday card with a passive-aggressive note like, "Miss you. Hope you remember you have a mother." I tried to build a life of my own. I made friends. I studied hard. I even started dating a girl I really liked, something I could never have told my mom about. She would have had a fit. Slowly, I began to feel like a real person and not just an extension of my mother's will. I wish I could say that's where it ended, that I broke away and lived happily ever after, free from her web of lies. But that string of condolence messages blinking up at me proved I was never really free. My mom's need for control and attention ran too deep. And now, she had spun her grandest story yet, one that painted me out of existence entirely. I snapped out of my daze and forced myself off the floor, legs trembling. I needed answers, immediately. With shaking fingers, I dialed my mother's number. It rang, and rang. I stared at the screen, desperate, angry, terrified. She didn't pick up. Of course she didn't. Maybe she was busy receiving condolences for my death. The thought made me almost throw the phone across the room in frustration. Instead, I scrolled to another contact and hit call. Aunt Lydia, my mom's older sister. She lived 2 states away, and we weren't very close, but she'd always been kind to me at family gatherings. More importantly, she was active on social media. If anyone knew what was happening, it would be her. The phone barely finished a single ring before she answered, as if she'd been waiting by the phone. "Hello, who is this?" Her voice sounded wary, tired. "Aunt Lydia, it's me." I began, but she cut me off with a sharp intake of breath. "Is this some kind of cruel prank?" she whispered. I could hear the tremble in her words. "This isn't funny. Whoever this is, it's not funny." My throat clenched. "It's really me," I said quickly, realizing how shocking it must be for her. "It's my name. I'm okay, I promise. I'm alive." There was a long silence, just the faint static of the line. Then I heard her release a shaky breath. Oh my God, oh my God. My name? Sweetheart, is that really you?" She sounded on the verge of tears. Yes, it's me," I assured her, my own voice cracking. A surge of emotion welled up. Hearing the concern and hope in my aunt's voice brought home the reality of what Mom had done. People genuinely thought I was dead. My family had been mourning me. Lydia started sobbing softly into the phone. "We thought, your mother told us you had a car accident. She said it was quick, that you didn't suffer." She took a moment to compose herself. "She even sent us an obituary and was planning a memorial for you this weekend." I closed my eyes, a fresh wave of nausea hitting me. A memorial. My mother had been about to hold a memorial service for me. I pictured a room full of relatives dressed in black, enlarged photos of me on display, maybe a glossy program with my name printed beneath some sappy poem. The surreal horror of it all made my skin prickle. "Aunt Lydia," I said, swallowing hard. "I don't understand. I'm fine. I'm here. Why would Mom say that?" I don't know. "Honey," Lydia replied softly, and I could hear the anger beneath her gentle tone. None of it made sense. "About 3 weeks ago, your mother had called me, hysterical, claiming you died in a car accident. Mom even circulated an obituary via email and arranged a memorial service, though she refused to offer many specifics about the supposed crash. Those inconsistencies made me uneasy, so I flew out for the service anyway. I'm at a hotel in town right now. I needed to be here, even if..." She stopped herself, then continued in a choked voice. "And I'm so glad I did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have believed it when you called." My mind whirled as I paced the kitchen. 3 weeks. For nearly 3 weeks, my mother had been living in a reality where I was dead, telling stories about my final moments, planning a memorial, receiving family and friends in her home, accepting sympathy. How could she do this? How could she carry on such a monstrous lie for that long? The initial disbelief was igniting into anger now, cutting through the numbness. I realized Lydia was speaking again. "Sweetheart, I hate to ask, but are you safe? Do you need a place to stay?" Because if your mother lied about this, she didn't finish, but I knew what she was implying. If Mom could lie about something this huge, who knew what else she might do? I'm safe, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure in that moment. I lived in a small apartment across town, a place Mom didn't have a key to. But suddenly the walls felt paper thin. A paranoid thought flickered through me. If Mom had already decided I was dead, would she try to make it true? My stomach lurched. No, I told myself firmly, don't go there. Mom was a liar and a manipulator, but she wasn't violent. She had never physically harmed me. She just reimagined the truth. At least, that's what I needed to believe to stay calm. Aunt Lydia, I'm going to talk to her, I said with more confidence than I felt. I need to hear her say why. I need to look her in the eye and hear whatever explanation she has. Even as I said it, a part of me shrank from the idea. But I had to confront this nightmare head on. I couldn't let it fester. I understand, Lydia replied gently. But be careful. I'm in town, okay? If you need me. If anything happens, you call me immediately. Promise. I promise, I said. And, Aunt Lydia? Thank you. I'm so sorry you had to go through all this. I'm just glad you're alive, she breathed. The rest we can sort out. Call me after you see her. Please. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up. My reflection in the dark phone screen looked back at me, eyes wide, face pale and streaked with tears. A dead girl walking. I thought about calling others, maybe my grandparents or my two closest friends from high school, to tell them I was okay. But that could wait until after I faced Mom. This whole ordeal was a tangled knot I had to unravel from the center, and the center was her. A hot current of anger surged beneath my confusion. Beneath the fear and shock, rage was steadily building. How dare she? How dare my own mother erase me like that? The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd ever felt. All the lies she'd told in the past suddenly seemed like tiny cracks in comparison to this canyon of deceit. She had effectively killed me in her story. For what? To punish me for leaving? To get attention and sympathy? A mix of hurt and fury twisted in my chest. I needed to know. I had to hear her say why. As I grabbed my car keys, a memory flashed through my mind. Mom comforting me with a popsicle after lying about my goldfish. Mom burning Dad's photos and saying he was as good as dead. All those were warning signs, I realized. Signs that her love was conditional on me playing along with her reality. And now, because I stopped playing along, because I left, she'd written me out of the story entirely. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I started my car. Dusk was falling as I drove the familiar route to my mother's house, the house I grew up in. The sky burned orange and red on the horizon, a bloody sunset that felt ominous and strangely appropriate. I tried to steady my breathing, to tamp down the adrenaline making my limbs jittery. I rehearsed what I might say to her, but my thoughts were a jumbled mess of pain and questions. Why, Mom? Why would you do this to me? That question reverberated in my head, matching the rhythm of my heart thudding in my ears as I finally turned onto her street. I had no idea what I was about to walk into, or if I was truly prepared for the answer. All I knew was that nothing in my life had ever been more important than this confrontation. That's when I saw her house come into view, and realized my nightmare was about to get even more real. The house was eerily quiet as I pulled into the driveway. Dusk cast long shadows over the lawn where I used to play as a kid. My mom's car was in the driveway, and warm light glowed through the living room curtains. From the outside, nothing looked unusual, just a normal evening at a normal house. But my heart was pounding so hard it hurt, and a cold sweat dampened my back. I stepped up to the front door and found it unlocked, so I let myself in. The familiar scent of lemon cleaning polish and freshly brewed coffee greeted me. For a moment, I just stood in the entryway, taking in the silence, feeling like an intruder in a life that had supposedly ended. Then I heard it, the soft clink of a spoon against a ceramic mug in the kitchen. Mom always drank coffee in the evenings. She said it settled her nerves. The sound was so ordinary, so normal, that a flash of absurd anger went through me. How could she be calmly stirring sugar into her coffee while telling the world I was dead? I swallowed hard and forced myself to move. I crept down the hallway toward the living room, each step slow and heavy. My foot bumped something on the floor. It was a large poster board covered in photos of me under the words, "In loving memory of my name." Even one of our framed pictures now sported a black ribbon. My stomach lurched at the sight. "You shouldn't be here." I jumped at the voice. My mother stood in the doorway to the kitchen, a coffee mug in hand. She hadn't raised her voice at all. She said it in the same mild tone she might use if I'd walked in on a private phone call, calm, but with a hint of reproach. She wore her favorite blue cardigan, the one that always brought out the color in her eyes. Those eyes were fixed on me now, unreadable. For a second, neither of us moved. The absurdity of the situation hung between us like fog. I realized I was trembling from head to foot. Mom, I managed to croak, barely above a whisper. What is all this? My words shook, and I hated how weak they sounded. She took a slow sip of her coffee, as if we had all the time in the world. Then she set the mug down on a side table and gently straightened a framed graduation photo of me that I had jostled. It's exactly what it looks like, she said quietly. A memorial. For you. A chill rippled through me. She said it so matter-of-factly, as if this were the most normal thing in the world, as if I were actually gone. But I'm not dead, I said, a little louder this time. My voice echoed oddly in the foyer. Hearing myself say those words, something no living person should ever have to say to their parent, made the whole situation even more nightmarish. Mom tilted her head slightly, considering my statement. Her expression stayed unsettlingly placid. Of course you're not, she replied. But you are gone. With that, she turned and walked unhurriedly into the living room. After a moment's hesitation, I followed. I found her standing by the coffee table, which was littered with evidence of her charade. Sympathy cards, half-addressed envelopes, a printed stack of obituaries with my name on them. My mother picked up one of the obituary sheets and aligned it perfectly with the others, busy hands, focusing on minutiae. I realized she was avoiding looking directly at me. Mom, I said, my throat tight. Look at me, please. She finally raised her eyes to mine. There was an eerie calmness there, a distant serenity. It was the expression she wore at other people's funerals, polite, composed sorrow. Seeing that look directed at me made my skin crawl. How could you do this? I whispered. I wanted to scream it, but my voice cracked. How could you tell everyone I died? She sighed softly, as if I'd asked why she left the lights on. She set down the papers and busied herself by tidying some framed photos and a vase of white lilies she'd arranged on the mantel, a little shrine to me. People were asking about you, she said after a moment, still not looking at me. After you left for school, everyone kept asking how you were, what you were doing. It was exhausting. She picked up a silver-framed photo of me blowing out candles on my 17th birthday cake. I remembered that day. She'd snapped at me for dripping wax on the frosting. Now she stroked the edge of the frame gently, almost reverently. Then when you stopped calling regularly, she continued in that same detached tone. People started asking even more questions. Why weren't you visiting? Why weren't you calling? I didn't have the answers they wanted. You were off living your life, and I had nothing to tell them. She finally turned to face me fully. She wasn't crying. Her eyes were dry and clear. My mother has always been an attractive, meticulously put-together woman, and even now she looked prim, her hair neatly brushed, lipstick fresh. Only a slight tightness at the corners of her mouth betrayed any emotion. It was easier, she said simply, to tell them you were gone. Easier, I echoed, barely believing my ears. My voice was rising now, anger bleeding through the shock. It was easier to tell people I was dead than to tell the truth? Mom, do you have any idea what? It's not about truth, she cut in, her tone still infuriatingly calm. She set the silver frame back on the mantel with a soft clink. It's about what people believe, what they want to believe. And they believe this, my name. They believed every word. I stared at her, heart hammering. But why? I pleaded. A tremor crept into my voice despite my efforts to steady it. Why would you want them to believe I'm gone? What could you possibly get out of that? She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, I saw something like raw vulnerability flash across her face before it smoothed out again. Sympathy, she said quietly. Understanding. After all I've done for you, after all I gave up. You know, the only time people truly listened to me, cared about me, was when they thought I'd lost you. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut all over again. My mother's words hung in the air, equal parts horrifying and heartbreakingly honest. So, this was all for attention? For you? I asked, voice shaking. She flinched at the accusation in my tone. A flicker of irritation crossed her face. Don't say it like that, she murmured. You make it sound so selfish. I let out a bark of disbelief, a sour, humorless laugh. Mom, what else would you call this? My hands were trembling at my sides. You convinced everyone I was dead. You lied to your own family, your friends, everyone. You let them cry over me. You let them think I was gone forever. How is that not selfish? How could you put me through that? She finally showed a crack in her composure, her brow creased, lips twisting in annoyance. It's not like I wanted to hurt anyone, she snapped, a sudden heat in her voice. I was hurting too, you know. She lifted her chin, and for the first time I saw tears glinting in her eyes. Every day since you left, I've been hurting. I swiped at my own tear-streaked face. So you decided to punish me? Punish everyone by pretending I died. My words came out harsher than I intended, raw and dripping with the betrayal I felt. Mom set her jaw. She picked up her coffee mug again with a trembling hand and took a long sip, maybe to buy time to gather herself. When she set it down, her voice wavered just slightly, the tiniest fracture in her detachment. You abandoned me, she said. You left me all alone. People were asking what I did wrong, why my own daughter didn't visit. Do you know how that felt? She gave a short, bitter laugh. But when they thought you were dead, suddenly I was blameless. I was a victim. They all pitied me. They finally treated me with care, with kindness. I stared at her in disbelief. My mind struggled to process that my mother, my own mother, preferred the sympathy of me being dead over the reality of me living a life independent of her. You can't possibly think this is okay, I managed. My voice was dangerously quiet now. Mom, you need help. This is not normal. She bristled. I'm not crazy, she said sharply, reading the implication in my words. Try to see it from my side for once. She gestured around vaguely at the condolence cards and photos. All my life, people have left. Your father left. You left. I was invisible, but a grieving mother. She gave a faint, incredulous smile. A grieving mother becomes important. People bring meals, they come by to check on you, they say nice things about your child. I became somebody that people cared about. Her voice softened, turning almost eerily dreamy. In their eyes, I went from that poor woman who can't keep her family together to that poor woman who lost her only child. And they all wanted to comfort me. Do you understand how warm that felt? To finally have everyone's arms around me, instead of their judgment. I felt something inside me break. I realized I was looking at my mother. This composed, attractive woman clutching sympathy cards like talismans, and I was truly seeing her for the first time. Not as my mom, but as a deeply troubled person. Someone whose desperation for validation had driven her to rewrite her own child's life story into a tragedy. It was grotesque. It was heartbreaking. I swiped at fresh tears on my cheeks. My anger was still there, hot and righteous, but underneath it lay a deep, aching sadness. Mom, I said, and my voice cracked. I'm your daughter. I'm right here alive. I'm alive. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Instead of all these strangers feeling sorry for you, what about me? Don't you care that I'm here, that I'm okay? She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for one split second I saw the mask slip. Her face crumpled, grief, shame, and love all warping together. She took a hesitant step toward me. Sweetie, of course I'm glad you're okay, she began, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I recoiled instinctively, stepping back around the coffee table, out of reach. I couldn't bear her touch, not now. Don't, I choked out. Don't you dare say you're glad I'm okay after you've been parading me around as a corpse for weeks. Her hand fell limply to her side. A flash of hurt crossed her face, quickly smothered by anger. What was I supposed to do? She snapped suddenly, voice rising for the first time. You abandoned me. You left me with nothing, no one. You didn't call, you didn't visit. I was living my life, Mom. I shouted back, the dam finally breaking. I wasn't dead. I wasn't missing. I was living. Because that's what grown children do. They live their own lives. And you couldn't handle that. You had to make it all about you. Lower your voice, Mom hissed, eyes darting toward the front window. Always worried about appearances, even now. I threw my hands up. Are you serious? The neighbors think I'm dead, Mom. Who cares if they hear us? I was laughing, a high, hysterical sound. Maybe they'll just think you're shouting at my ghost. She winced as if I'd slapped her. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other, both breathing hard. Then she spoke, and her voice was deathly quiet. You left me, she said. You left. People whispered about what kind of mother I must be, to have a daughter who never came home. Do you know how small that made me feel? But when they thought I lost you, drowned in grief, those whispers turned into condolences. They looked at me like I was innocent, like I was good. Better a tragic mother than a failed one. I was so stunned I could only stand there, heart hammering. Tragic mother instead of failed one. In her twisted logic, I realized she truly believed this was the only narrative where she came out blameless, where she could finally be the object of pure compassion, not judgment. Mom inhaled deeply, composing herself. A single tear had escaped down her cheek, but she ignored it. She straightened her cardigan and smoothed her hair, as if preparing for a portrait. Then she looked at me, almost defiantly. People liked me better when I was grieving, she said, her voice flat and eerily calm again. They finally cared. That was it. The devastating truth. I swayed where I stood, a wave of exhaustion crashing over me. I felt hollowed out, scraped raw from the inside. There was nothing left to say, no argument, no plea that could fix this gaping wound between us. My mother was sick. She was sick, and I couldn't cure her. I realized I was crying again, silent tears pouring down my face. She watched me, her eyes unreadable. For a moment, I thought I saw regret in them, but I couldn't be sure. We stayed like that, suspended in a terrible stillness, me weeping, her standing rigidly among the fake gravitas of our living room memorial. Finally, I broke the silence. I need to go, I whispered. Mom's eyes widened slightly. She took a half step forward. Go? You just got here, she said, and there was real fear in her voice now. We should talk more. I can explain more. Maybe we can still. No, I shook my head. I had nothing left. No energy, no fight. Just an immense sadness weighing me down. I can't do this. Not right now. She opened her mouth as if to protest, but I was already backing away. I turned and made my way toward the front door on unsteady legs. Behind me, I heard her footsteps follow into the foyer. If you walk out now, she said behind me, quietly but firmly, don't expect things to ever be normal again. I paused, hand on the doorknob. I let out a soft, bitter laugh at the absurdity of that statement. Nothing is normal now, Mom. She didn't reply. I glanced over my shoulder and saw her standing there, her face pale and drawn, eyes shiny with unshed tears. In that moment, she didn't look like the composed, grieving mother or the furious liar. She just looked lost. For a split second, I almost faltered. She opened her mouth, lips trembling. She began, in a small voice. But I couldn't hear whatever came next. Whether it was an apology or another justification or a plea, it didn't matter anymore. I yanked the door open and stepped out into the cool night air. My name, she called softly behind me, using my name for the first time in the whole confrontation. There was a desperate, childlike quality to the way she said it. I kept walking. I walked across the porch and into the night without looking back. She didn't chase after me. She just stood in the doorway, framed by the light of the hall, watching me leave her, this time, alive, for good. As I turned the corner at the end of the block, a wrenching sob erupted from my chest. I had to pull over 2 streets down because I couldn't see through my tears to drive. I slumped over my steering wheel, shaking violently as the full weight of what had happened crashed into me. My own mother would rather have a dead daughter to mourn than a living one she couldn't control. That realization was more painful than any lie she'd ever told me. Later that night, I collapsed into Aunt Lydia's arms at her hotel. Through tears, we tried to make sense of it all. Lydia confessed that my mother had a long history of extreme lies and attention-seeking behavior even before I was born. It became clear that this twisted stunt had nothing to do with me failing her. It was about her own illness and need for sympathy. That knowledge didn't erase my hurt, but it did help me understand that her actions were rooted in her own brokenness, not in any lack on my part. My aunt made sure I wasn't alone that night. I spent a few hours at her hotel, sipping hot tea and numbly answering some of her gentle questions. I learned that none of my other relatives had actually seen my body or anything. Mom told everyone it was a closed casket situation and that they should remember me as I was. The more I heard, the more it made my head spin. By early morning, I decided to head back to my own apartment. I promised Lydia I'd meet her again first thing and that we'd figure out the next steps together. She made me swear to call if I needed anything at all. As I left, she hugged me fiercely and said, "None of this is your fault, sweetheart. You know that, right?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice not to crack. But her words did sink in. Deep down, I think I'd known it all along. Something was very, very wrong with Mom, and it wasn't because of me. The sun was just rising as I drove home, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. It should have been a beautiful morning, but I felt like I was in a daze. My phone was vibrating nonstop now with incoming texts. Word must have begun spreading that I was, in fact, alive. I didn't have the energy to look at them yet. Once I got back to my apartment, I did 2 things almost automatically. I locked and bolted my door, and I slid the chain in place. It was a tiny act, but it made me feel a little safer. Then I collapsed onto my bed without bothering to undress. My body was bone-tired, but my mind wouldn't shut off. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, replaying the confrontation with Mom on an endless loop. Her words, her eerily calm face, the way she said they liked me better when I was grieving, it all churned inside me. I didn't know whether to cry or scream or throw something. Eventually, I drifted into a restless sleep, still in my clothes, tears drying on my cheeks. I woke up late the next morning to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. For a disorienting moment, I wasn't sure if the previous day had been real or just the worst nightmare of my life. But as soon as I blinked awake, the ache in my chest told me the truth. This was real. All of it. I sat up and gingerly picked up my phone. There were dozens upon dozens of notifications. Missed calls, text messages, social media alerts. My stomach flipped, anxiety rising. Taking a deep breath, I started sifting through them. One of the first texts that caught my eye was from my best friend Mariah. "Girl, Are you alive? Please tell me this is real. Call me ASAP. Another was from an unknown number that turned out to be an old neighbor. I just heard you're alive? This is unbelievable. We need to talk. There were messages from co-workers, from distant cousins, even from numbers I didn't recognize, likely friends of Mom's or old family friends. Half of them were people in shock, making sure it was really me. The other half were people expressing a mix of relief and fury, relief that I was okay, and fury at having been deceived. I realized I had to address the elephant in the room publicly, and soon, before rumors ran even wilder. With trembling hands, I opened Facebook. My profile had been dormant for months, but now it was flooded with tags and posts from others like "Rest in peace," messages and expressions of grief. My heart clenched seeing a collage of my childhood photos someone had posted with "Gone too soon. You were so loved." It was beyond surreal to scroll through a feed mourning my death while I sat there very much alive. I finally made a public post to set the record straight. A brief message explaining that I was alive and that news of my death was false. Almost instantly, reactions and comments poured in. I felt overwhelmed just watching the storm unfold online. I typed a blanket response. It's a long and very complicated story. I only just found out what was said. All I can say right now is that I am alive and safe. I'm so sorry for any pain or confusion caused. I'll explain more soon. That didn't stop the tsunami of questions, but at least it confirmed the basics. People were bewildered and demanded answers. Some had attended my memorial and wanted to know what happened. Others were relieved I was alive, but upset at being misled. My inbox filled with emotional messages, some sympathetic, some angry. A few of Mom's closest friends seemed particularly upset, likely feeling betrayed. I carefully replied to a couple of them, assuring them I had not been part of any scheme. But I knew I couldn't respond to everyone's shock and rage individually. It was just too much. Instead, I focused on the most important personal contacts. I called my grandparents as soon as I gathered the courage. That might have been one of the most emotional conversations of my life. My grandmother literally dropped the phone when she realized it was me, then came back on sobbing so hard she could barely speak. My grandfather, who prides himself on keeping it together, openly cried too. They were overjoyed, confused, and livid all at once. It took a while to convince them I was really okay. They wanted to drive straight over and see me. Part of me thought maybe we should wait, but I couldn't bear to refuse them. I needed them as much as they needed to see me. My grandparents even drove down to see me with their own eyes. That reunion was full of tears and hugs. They were overjoyed I was alive and furious at what my mother had done. Grandpa kept shaking his head, saying, "I just can't believe she'd do this to us." To you. Grandma smothered me in kisses and clutched my hand like she might lose me again if she let go. There was anger, yes, but mostly there was relief. In their eyes, I saw the genuine gratitude that I was still standing in front of them, heart beating, warm to the touch. Not everyone was so quick to celebrate, though. As news spread that I was alive, a few people reacted with something like betrayal. One of Mom's longtime friends sent me a terse message. "Do you have any idea what your mother went through? I don't understand how you could let her believe you were dead." That one stung, even though I knew I hadn't let Mom do anything. Another person, a former neighbor, wrote on my Facebook, "This is just sick. We had a memorial and everything. Why would someone lie about something like this?" Emotions were running high in every direction. By that afternoon, Mom's social media profiles had quietly disappeared. She deleted her Facebook, her Instagram, everything. It's like she wanted to vanish rather than face the fallout. Her silence worried me. A knot of guilt and concern tightened in my stomach. What would she do now that her big story was exposed as a lie? I got the first hint a few hours later when I received a call from Carol, one of my mother's closest friends. Carol's voice was edged with panic. She said Mom wasn't answering the door or the phone for anyone, and she'd left Carol a strange voicemail that sounded like a goodbye. My blood ran cold. As angry as I was, the last thing I wanted was for Mom to actually hurt herself. I alerted Aunt Lydia immediately. Within an hour, my uncles had driven to Mom's house to check on her. I stayed by my phone, anxiety gnawing a hole in my stomach. Finally, Uncle Rob texted, "Got in. She's alive. In bad shape, but alive. Taking her to the hospital now." I sank onto my couch, weak with relief, and guilt, and sadness. A complicated tangle of feelings I couldn't even begin to unravel. In the days that followed, my mother was kept under psychiatric care. I was told she swung between denial, shame, and anger, sometimes insisting there had been a misunderstanding, other times sobbing inconsolably. It was clear she was in a fragile mental state, and frankly, that's where she needed to be. I didn't visit her. I couldn't, not yet. I did send a message through Aunt Lydia, telling Mom I was glad she was getting help. She didn't respond directly, But Lydia said Mom cried when she read it. As the shock and gossip in our family began to settle, the practical cleanup began. There were awkward phone calls to be made, explaining to relatives and friends that no, I wasn't dead after all. Some were purely joyful conversations, like with a cousin who burst into happy tears and said, "This is the first time we get to uncancel a funeral." Others were more delicate, like with a family friend who had quietly raised money for a charity in my memory and now felt embarrassed. I tried my best to convey to each person that I was so sorry they had been put through this. Most were just relieved to hear my voice and didn't care about the rest. In the aftermath, I also took concrete steps to reclaim my life. I changed my emergency contacts on all my forms, removing my mother's name and putting down Aunt Lydia's instead. I blocked Mom's phone number, for now, at least, because I needed a boundary while she was in treatment. I even decided to legally change my last name, opting to take my grandmother's maiden name. It may sound extreme, but I needed that symbolic separation. Each small act felt like regaining a piece of myself that she'd tried to steal. There were, unsurprisingly, no legal consequences for Mom beyond some bridges burned with friends. We discovered she hadn't filed any false police reports or anything official. She'd kept the lie to the personal sphere. A few people quietly asked if I was going to press charges for anything. One relative muttered about fraud because Mom accepted some sympathy gifts, but I refused to go down that road. This was a family tragedy, not a crime to be punished. My mother needed mental help, not jail. The hardest part in the weeks after was processing the emotional wreckage. I started seeing a therapist who helped me begin untangling the trauma of what I'd been through. At first, I downplayed it. It's not like she tried to kill me or anything. I told the therapist in our first session. It was just a lie. He gently helped me see that it wasn't just a lie. It was a profound betrayal and an emotional abuse of both me and everyone who cared about me. I had to learn that it was okay to be devastated and furious and heartbroken about it. I wrote a long letter to my mom in therapy, not to send, just to get everything out. In it, I told her how her lie made me feel, how seeing my own obituary twisted something deep inside me, how hearing her say people liked her better when I was dead was a wound I'm not sure will ever fully heal. I told her I loved her, but that I needed to love myself enough to stay away from her toxicity. Whether she ever reads a version of that letter or not, I don't know. But writing it was liberating. Not long ago, I went to a park at sunset and whispered to myself, "I'm here and I'm alive," letting those words wash over me like a healing balm. In that quiet moment, it truly felt like I was closing one chapter of my life and starting another. I've slowly been reclaiming the narrative of my own life. I went back to classes, bracing for odd looks. Some classmates had heard weird rumors, but ultimately people were more curious than cruel. I met up with friends who kept hugging me, as if to make sure I was real. We even managed to joke a bit. Dark humor has its place. One friend brought a welcome back to life cake to our coffee hangout, which made me laugh for the first time in what felt like ages. My mother is still under psychiatric care as I finish writing this. I've heard through Lydia that Mom is embarrassed and not ready to see me, which is fine because I'm not ready either. Maybe, with treatment, she'll get better. Maybe not. I don't know what the future holds for my mother. I've accepted that I can't save or change her. I can only choose to save myself and live in truth. The hardest truth I've had to accept is that the mother I need, one who celebrates my life rather than mourns my independence, might never exist. The woman who raised me is deeply ill in ways I can't fix. And while I do feel sorry for her, I also have to protect myself. Loving her doesn't mean letting her destroy me. If there's a silver lining to all of this, it's that I've discovered an inner strength I didn't know I had. I survived being erased. I stood at my own figurative funeral and exposed the lie. I took my life back. Not everyone gets that chance. As bizarre and painful as this experience was, I get to move forward and decide what happens next in my story. My name, my real name, won't be remembered as a memorial hashtag or a sad obituary. It's going to be attached to my life, my messy, complicated, beautiful, ongoing life. I'm going to live, love, struggle, and thrive on my own terms, with people around me who value me alive. My mother tried to write an ending for me that wasn't hers to write, but I took the pen back. I'm writing my own story now, chapter by chapter, day by day, and it's a story of survival, truth, and a hard-won sense of self. Real talk. Have you ever had someone twist your story so badly you barely recognized yourself in it? No details needed, but drop a comment if you've ever had to take your life back from someone who tried to erase it. And hit subscribe if stories like this matter to you.